All right, our next question, we will start with candidate Francis. What do you feel is the biggest challenge facing Kansas?
I think it's the urban-rural divide. I think right now the urban legislators think that we owe them, that they're subsidizing our lifestyle, our way of life. And I think that is the biggest thing that we have to do is we have to get them to respect us. We have to get them to understand that Western Kansas being strong makes them stronger. And I think that's our biggest problem right now.
Thank you, candidate Francis. Candidate Rice.
Well, there's a good possibility that it might be the depletion of the Ogallala aquifer. You know, in our area, and not only in our area, but across the United States, the Ogallala provides a lot of dollars, revenue dollars, coming in. And just attended a meeting. They've been holding statewide meetings, you know, to try to decide what to do, you know, how to extend the life of that aquifer. Because I think once that's gone, and we wait on Mother Nature, if we have 5 years in the future like we've had 5 years in the past, it's going to be sad news out here. So I would say it's our water supply.
Thank you, candidate Rice. Candidate Francis, 30 seconds to rebut.
I think that's definitely the biggest problem for Southwest Kansas. But again, it's as far as statewide, I think it's the rural-urban divide. It's all of us working together to make Kansas better, making sure that my kids have a good education, the kids in Johnson County have a good education, making sure that my kids can come home and have a career and live here and be successful for the rest of their lives.
Thank you, candidate Francis. Candidate Rice, 30 seconds if you choose.
I'll pass.
All right, thank you, candidates. Our next question, we will start with candidate Rice. Do you feel that state regulatory agencies understand the impact of their decisions on Southwest Kansas? Explain why or why not. Do you feel that state regulatory agencies understand the impact of their decisions on Southwest Kansas?
To be quite frank with you, I don't know that they care. You know, and I hope that they do, but, you know, and it's not necessarily a state issue, but I guess it is partially with the Fish and Game, and again, I bring up the lesser prairie chicken issue. You know, when you can't go to your oil well or your gas well until 9 o'clock in the morning because you might disturb a bird out there, you know, that affects us greatly. If you can't start baling hay until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning when you should have been running at 3 o'clock in the morning, that affects that economy and the production off that land. So, you know, I would say that a lot of times that they don't have an idea or they do not consider the effects. And that's one reason that, you know, I think I can offer a voice in Topeka to perhaps wake them up just a little bit on the true effects of what they're doing to our county.
It's time. Candidate Rice, candidate Francis.
Can you repeat the question?
The question reads, do you feel that state regulatory agencies understand the impact of their decisions on Southwest Kansas? Explain why or why not.
Yeah, I think often that's the reason why local government is best, because the local government understands the ins and outs of our specific situation. Too often, we ask Topeka to solve our problems, and they do this blanket thing for across the state. And it might work good in Johnson County. It might work good in Wichita, but it doesn't work worth a darn in liberal Kansas or Rolla. And so I think that's often it. I don't think they try to do it. I think they just don't understand. You know, there's too many variables there for them to figure out. And we have to stand up and we have to explain to them when they're hurting our lifestyle, when they're hurting our way of life, we have to say, hey, you're screwing things up, guys. You know, you're causing more harm than good.
Thank you, candidate Francis. Candidate Rice, 30 seconds.
Pass.
Candidate Francis, both pass. All right, our next question, and we will start with candidate Francis. How would you protect the transportation fund and funding for Highway 54?
That's going to be a tough one. You know, if this budget crisis gets worse, the Bank of KDOT, that's what they call it, and they're not joking, they call it the Bank of KDOT. What they do is they go out and they issue bonds, they put them in the highway department, and then when they have a deficit, they take money from it. They've took over $1 billion from the bank of KDOT over the last 14 years. We'd have Highway 54 if they weren't always robbing the money from it. All you can do is scream, all you can do is yell. You can try to build coalitions across the state with other people that have highway projects still on the board. My understanding is Highway 54 is the last project to be done, so if they take any money from it, it's the first to be cut. We're going to have to scream, we're going to have to yell, we're going to have to be adamant about the problems affecting the budget.
Thank you, Candidate Francis. Candidate Rice.
You know, I agree. It's a very difficult thing, and there's nothing more upsetting to me than when the legislature needs money, they run to KDOT to get the funds to do what they can't appropriate enough funds for. And, you know, I guess I would say I would vote no on every one of those because it is very aggravating that they do that, but that's just, you know, kind of been the go-to bank, and that's how we fund the state when we run short of funds, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous and a very poor way to manage your budget. But, you know, so anytime I get a chance to vote, I'm going to vote twice, and I'm going to vote no.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. Candidate Francis, 30 seconds if you choose.
I agree 100%. And they'll probably put 5 or 6 poison pills in that bill so that in 2 years you won't remember that we voted no on Highway 54. You'll remember the other 6 things we voted no on also.
Candidate Rice, 30 more seconds.
I'm fine.
All right. All right, we will start this question with Candidate Rice. Candidate Rice, what is your position on renewable energy?
You know, I think renewable energy is a great thing. I just have been involved, you know, I guess first time I was ever around renewable energy was when in 1979 when the farmers took their tractors to Washington, D.C. And they actually set up an alcohol still on the mall. And that was my first experience of being around that. But, you know, I can see a great benefit for that. I think we need that. You know, we've got, you know, good oil and gas supply, but we also need to go to alternatives, you know, ethanol, wind energy, solar. We need to develop those things. But I'll tell you one other thing, the government doesn't need to be involved in that. That needs to come from, you know, the private sector. There's nobody better than the private sector.
Candidate Rice. Candidate Francis.
You know, wind energy in western Kansas has added $8 billion worth of investment in Kansas, 13,000 new jobs, and $16 million in landowner payments. The Kansas Chamber, one of their there's 14 contested races in the Republican primaries, I believe, across the state. The thing that made that decision was whether you voted to maintain the renewable portfolio standards. The renewable portfolio standards did not cost one government dollar. All it said was that 20% of your utility bills were supposed to come from renewable sources by 2020. And I'm going to run out of time right here, but I've got a few seconds left at the end. So it wasn't costing anybody anything. It was actually bringing down utility rates throughout the state. And I don't know why the Kansas Chamber is against that, but that's their key issue.
Candidate Rice, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
Yeah.
Candidate Francis, you have 30 seconds if you choose to take it.
Some of the misinformation that's gone out there about wind energy, by the way, and we all know it's hard to get good jobs in rural Kansas. Wind is one of those ways we're bringing income to our local communities. And Kansas has the second best wind in the entire nation. So if we want to grow, we have to grow with things like ethanol. We have to grow with things like wind power. We have to grow with things like dairies. And if every time somebody gets upset in Topeka and they're trying to kill it, we can't go there. You know, it's hard enough to make a living in western Kansas.
Time, Candidate Francis. All right. I believe we now will move on to our next question, and this will be starting with Candidate Francis. Candidate Francis, what would be your role in removing legislative gridlock? What would be your role in removing legislative gridlock? Candidate Francis.
I think somewhere we need to change the tone. I think Everybody's mad all the time. I get mad, you know. I get upset when people try to take away my Highway 54 spending. You know, I'm just kind of a laid-back guy. I'm always out there looking for opportunities. I'm usually not out there looking for things to be upset about. But I think we got to change the tone in Topeka. We have to get away from Washington-style politics, and we got to understand it's that urban-rural divide, that we're all in this together. We all want good jobs for our kids. We all want our kids to have a great education. And we've got to get back to the basics in Topeka, and we've got to try to make lives better for Kansans that we're representing.
Candidate Rice, what would be your role in removing legislative gridlock?
You know, that's a difficult question because, you know, common sense is a dangerous thing, especially when you get around politicians that have a mission and a goal in mind. But, you know, I think, you know, just my ability to perhaps talk with those folks, to provide them with facts. I remember when I first got on the county commission, and I told County Administrator Mary Bloomer, I said, you know, I don't care what the subject is or what we're going to do. I said, you furnish me all of the facts, and then we can sit down at the table and talk it over. And if you don't do that, I don't want to sit down at the table and look stupid. So, you know, I think provided if you study the facts and you sit down and you talk with these folks, you know, there's always a possibility that you might bring them a little bit towards your direction. So I think communication is probably an important part of that.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. Candidate Francis, 30 seconds.
You know, I think Jim's right. It's communication. It's understanding that everybody that you're working with has a good heart. It's trying to find the things that you can work on together and realizing that we're not going to agree on this one. And, you know, I may win that one, I may lose it, but, you know, the next time I'm going to be right back up there again trying to do it again. So it's tone. There was a lot of complaints when I was on the county commission that we got along too well. Well, you know, we didn't necessarily get along too well, but we found the things we could work on together.
Candidate Rice, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think I'll pass.
All right, we are down to our final two questions. Final two questions of the evening, so you guys can breathe just a little bit easier. All right, we will start with Candidate Rice. There has been talk of eliminating the State Board of Education or having the governor appoint State Board of Education members. Do you believe the State Board of Education should be an elected or appointed body, and why?
You know, I have great concerns about appointed bodies. You know, I think that you people here have a lot better idea about who your candidate should be and who you need to elect by attending forums like this and being educated on that. If the governor or you know, some group in Topeka decides, you know, who that is, chances are it's not going to be anybody that really represents the true values of this group. So, you know, I'm all for that election process and about any state, anywhere, anytime. I just think the election by the people, you know, that goes something like of the people, by the people, and for the people. I think that's where we need to stay.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. Candidate Francis, 1 minute.
I agree 100%. I think sometimes when we have Republican majorities in the House and the Senate and a Republican government, we forget that Representative Holmes, when he served for 28 years, he served 14 years with a Democratic governor, and he served 14 years with a Republican governor. So, you know, sometimes you might get what you wish for. So I think the election process is great. We'll always have a Republican Board of Education member in that process, I think.
Candidate Rice, 30 seconds if you choose.
I'm fine.
Candidate Rice passes. Candidate Francis? Pass. Final question of the evening, and then we'll enter into our 3-minute closing remark statement. Do you support, and we will start with Candidate Francis, do you support a referendum on legalizing marijuana, and why? I'm sorry I saved that one for last.
The answer is no.
Candidate Rice?
Why? Excuse me. You know, I think there's plenty of drugs and alcohol in our system. I don't think we're doing anybody any favors except Topeka that probably wants tax revenue off of it or something stupid like that. You know, drugs and alcohol are a bane on our communities, and I don't see any reason for it.
Candidate Rice?
Absolutely not. You know, I don't think eventually the cost involved with additional law enforcement, you know, health care. We talked a little bit ago about mental health issues, those kind of things. I don't think marijuana has any place in our community, and there's no way that the benefits will outweigh the negatives. So, you know, I wouldn't vote for that. I wouldn't even want to get close to the ballot.
All right, each candidate will have 30 seconds to rebut or add any additional comments. Candidate Francis? No. Candidate Francis declines. Candidate Rice?
Thank
you. Candidate Rice declines. That wraps up our questioning